Hey, Larken Rose here. I'm going to do another quiet version of me video. We'll see if that lasts for the entire video. So I've talked on many occasions about how people try to escape responsibility for their own actions and even for their own beliefs by deferring to somebody else. That's one of the main reasons people want to believe in authority, so they can just blindly obey somebody else and go, don't blame me. I just did what that guy said. Yeah, but you decided to do what that guy said, so it's still on you. You're still responsible. But that is the impossible feat of not being responsible for what you do. That's why a lot of people believe in authority, because they want to get out of the blame for what it is that they believe in and what they do. But there's an added weird element to that where people, they defer to authorities outside of themselves. And I try not to offend people too much when it comes to their religious beliefs. But a lot of people want to think, well, this book, this teaching, this church, that's the word of God. So I don't have to doubt it. I don't have to question it. I take it on faith. Okay, but who decided you were going to do that? You. And so some people think it's kind of funny, because some people think, well, you can't pick and choose what you believe. You have to pick and choose what you believe. Not even you really should. You do. Like, it's unavoidable. Like, if I decided I'm going to say that Fred over there is an infallible source of truth, and then Fred tells me 2 + 2 = 5. Okay. Do I now believe that 2 + 2 = 5? If so, I'm believing something ridiculous only because before I said I was going to treat him as an infallible source of truth and blindly believe whatever he said. But that's still me deciding to cling to that. And if I have a brain, I say, yeah, but 2 + 2 isn't 5. That's either, like, maybe Fred said that, maybe I heard him wrong, maybe he got drunk or something, whatever. But you have to use your own judgment, even if you find wisdom in other things, in religious teachings or anything else. You find that wisdom by measuring it against your own conscience, your own judgment. And this is something that I try not to do this very often, because I don't, like, if somebody knows how to peacefully coexist, I don't particularly want to just mess with their faith and have them question it just for the fun of it. It's not fun. But if I ask somebody, okay, I believe this book is the word of God. Okay, why? Is it because it said so? Because I can point to a bunch of other books that say so. Yeah, but this one, like, I read it and I feel that, okay, well, now you're talking about your own brain senses something in there, something important, something profound, something spiritual, whatever. But if there's a difference between, well, I just arbitrarily decided I'm going to believe that thing, and I read that thing, or I listened to that person, or I went to this church or whatever, and I heard the truth in it, and I learned from it. Okay, that's a different thing, because that's still you accepting responsibility as being the arbiter of truth for you, and that's all you have. Like, deferring to somebody else doesn't get you to the truth. You just still have your brain, as limited as it is. And that's not an insult. Everybody's brain is limited. As limited as my brain is, my judgment, my knowledge, all that, it's all I have to determine the truth. Deferring to somebody else, like, if I'm not qualified, if I'm not all-knowing, then I'm not qualified to determine who else is all-knowing. So, well, I'm just some clueless idiot, but I'm just going to decide that that guy knows everything. Well, if you're a clueless idiot, how would you know if that guy knows everything? But this attempt to defer the responsibility to something or somebody else, it gets extra weird when the thing that people defer to isn't even something they actually believe in. And that's very often. Now, the point of this isn't even the religious side of it, but there are a huge number of people who call themselves Christians who are nothing close to what Jesus described. By the way, I'm not a Christian, but what he actually said, like anybody who votes, anybody who supports Trump, you are nothing close to what Jesus described in any way, shape, or form. What he actually described is a life of almost poverty, give away all that you have, and most self-professed Christians don't do that. Now, I'm not even criticizing them for that, because I don't do that either, and I don't think they're obligated to give away everything they have. But the point is, when people pretend that they're deferring to something else, but then obviously don't, and obviously don't follow it, which is a very weird thing to me. Because if you're like, that guy's right, wait, that guy's not right, I don't agree with him on that. Okay, that makes sense. But to say, I think that guy's infallible. Okay, he said that 2 + 2 is 5. Do you think 2 + 2 is 5? Well, no. So you don't think he's infallible? No, he's infallible. I can defer to him. Yeah, but you don't defer to him. And so one glaring example is the number of Democrats and Republicans who give lip service to the Constitution. We have to defend this Constitution. None of you believe in that. Not a single Democrat, not a single Republican actually advocates what the Constitution says. Now, I'm not a Christian. I also don't believe in the Constitution because it's too authoritarian. It still tried to create a ruling class. But setting aside what I believe about it, because that's not the point, why would so many people proudly talk about the Constitution when they don't nearly actually believe in it? And again, it isn't just deferring to something else for their belief system. It's deferring to something else for the responsibility of their belief system. So it isn't, if I say your position is stupid, and they say, I believe in the Constitution, so go argue with the Constitution. The goal of that is for them to not have to justify their own beliefs. They can defer to something else. I'll go, this is the system we have, so I'm going to defer to you to the Constitution or to the whatever, instead of having to justify my own beliefs and what I advocate from scratch, on its own merits, which almost nobody can do. Almost nobody even tries to do. But the weird spectacle of so many Democrats, we have a constitutional right to blah, blah, blah. It's like, now, a bunch of them just haven't read it. It just sounds like a cool thing. Well, I want that on my side. So I'm going to say the Constitution doesn't allow you to do this. It also doesn't allow for anything that you've ever voted for in your entire life, but you suddenly don't give a crap when it's unconstitutional stuff that you're in favor of, which every Democrat is and every Republican is. But it's still weird that they'll talk as if you can't go against the Constitution, the sacred Constitution that I don't really give a crap about, but I'm going to pretend to whenever it happens to suit me. And the thing is, they're not pretending. They don't even see that. They're not doing it as some tricky manipulation. I mean, the politicians are in everything they do. But the Republican and Democrat voters, they don't even know how hypocritical and dishonest they're being when they say the Constitution protects us from whatever, or we have due process under the Constitution, the Fifth Amendment. Okay, but you don't believe in the rest of it. 365 days a year. You absolutely don't believe in the Ninth Amendment or the 10th Amendment or the First if you're on or the Second if you're on the left. The First if you're either one, but you're part-time pro-freedom of speech people, unless it's something you don't like and then you're trying to shut it up. But it's weird to me that people will still cling to something and defer to it when they obviously don't defer to it. They obviously don't believe in that, but they will still talk that way because they think they can defer responsibility even when it's something that they don't actually believe in the vast majority of the time, which is such a weird argument. And it's a thing that's come up before where I've quoted famous people before when they say something true. And often I'll even add in there, doesn't mean it's true because he's famous. And it doesn't mean he wasn't wrong about 15 other things. It means the way he said this is true and kind of profound. So I'm going to quote him saying that. And to a large degree, I do that. And sometimes I quote the Constitution. I do that to people who believe in that and pretend to believe in those people. Like, we believe in the founding fathers. Like, no, you don't. If you're a Democrat, no, you don't. If you're a Republican, no, you don't. Because you advocate authoritarian lunacy that neither the Federalists nor the Anti-Federalists were in support of. But this weird tendency to cite people as authority, it's the what's it called? Deferring to authority, logical fallacy, appeal to authority. Where you say, well, I'm quoting this smart, famous person, so it must be true. Yeah, that doesn't follow. And when I quote somebody like, I'll quote Thomas Jefferson saying something, and somebody will say, yeah, but he also owned slaves. And I'll say, yeah, he was absolutely a hypocrite. That was totally bogus and evil, and he said other dumb things. But this thing was true. But people are so used to, like, either I'm going to be on the side of that or I'm not going to be on the side of that, instead of realizing that, yeah, lots of people said, everybody who said true, profound things has also said stupid things and sometimes advocated evil things. But that demonstrates how much people would rather sort of hitch their trailer to some external authority and say, this is who I believe in. And one of the glaring examples of that is objectivists with Ayn Rand, which is extra weird because they sort of make her into an authority and say, well, she said this and she said that. And Ayn Rand got a ton of stuff right. And that's really impressive, the amount of insight she had, given that she was raised as livestock in the Soviet Union. And yet she couldn't give up her own belief in statism. And she thought, well, we need a government that enforces objective truth and justice and blah, blah, blah. It's like, why would that ever happen? Why would you expect that to ever happen? How do you think that's even conceptually possible, for there to be a monopoly on defensive violence and not be an aggressor? Like, what if I want to have a protection company? What's your monopoly going to do? But she was still stuck in the paradigm. So she had lots of really good observations and lots of really good understanding. There's plenty of things I can complain about. Things she said. Now, most of the complaints that the left has about Ayn Rand are total misrepresentations of what she actually said. But I've actually read what she said over and over again. Atlas Shrugged and The Fountainhead and a bunch of her other stuff. So what I criticized, she actually said and actually believed. It isn't like, you're just greedy and want people to die. Like, yeah. But this tendency seems to be just hardwired into us, that people want to have sort of a leader they can defer to. And it might be a book, it might be a religion, it might be a person, it might be a group. It's often a dead person from long ago. Well, this guy, everything he said was right. And people will still cite it. Like the Lysander Spooner wrote a thing. Was it him or Frederick Douglass? I think it was Lysander Spooner. Wrote a thing in defense of defensive voting. Like, I'm going to vote for the lesser of two evils. It's like, here, I'm quoting Lysander Spooner. And I said, yeah, he was wrong about that. And a lot of people responded, how could you say that? Like, not allowed to disagree with him about anything? He was really smart about lots of things. I think he got tons of stuff wrong. Why would I magically just agree with this thing too, just because he said it, when I think he's totally wrong? And I've explained why he's totally wrong. But the fact that people will sort of like, I quoted this guy, and I'm like, yeah, he was wrong too. Like, what a weird thing that you quoted the words from somebody else. So even those people are kind of doing the deferring to somebody else thing. As if, well, you're not allowed to disobey or disagree with Lysander Spooner, or here's Murray Rothbard saying this, or here's, all these famous pro-freedom people saying things. It's like, yeah, they could be wrong too. And I can be wrong too. Like, nobody, if they're listening to me and they agree and it makes sense, okay, if tomorrow I say something that to them doesn't make sense, they shouldn't go, well, Larken said must be right. Please don't ever do that. If it doesn't make sense to your judgment and your moral code, why would you take my word for it? Now, you might listen to me. You might give me the benefit of the doubt of, well, maybe he knows something. Maybe I'll listen and see what his point is, or even debate or argue with me or whatever. That's fine too. But the moment somebody defers to anything outside of themselves, that's just complete intellectual cowardice. And it's kind of sad that intellectual cowardice seems to be sort of wired into people, because it's a get out of responsibility free card, or that's what they want it to be. It isn't, because you're still deciding what you believe. You're still deciding what you do. You're still responsible for both of those things. But the weirdest to me is when people defer to somebody or something else that they don't even believe in. And it happens all the time. It happens, Christians will refer to the Bible. I believe this. Yeah, except no, you don't. For a lot of them. Some of them do. I know a number of Christian anarchists who really do seem to try to abide by what Jesus said. And I know some people who are actually constitutionalists who actually believe in it. None of them are Republicans. None of them are Democrats because of what it describes. Now, I think they're wrong too. I don't want that flavor of authoritarianism either, even though it's supposed to be really tiny compared to what we have. But the fact that so many people want to hide behind authorities they don't believe in is just really weird to me. And it's every Republican and every Democrat. And they even things like, well, we believe in democracy. No, you don't. You want your guy to win. If the other guy wins because they get a majority vote, none of you, Democrat or Republican, none of you are going to go, oh, good. All right, as long as the majority got their way, that's great, because democracy is what matters. None of you believe that. Nobody believes that. Nobody should believe that. But again, they'll hold it up like democracy as this sacred thing. And no, it's not. It's this insane scam that psychopaths came up with to make the livestock more obedient. Hey, we'll let them choose between left jackboot and right jackboot, and then we can tell them, hey, you consented to this, and this was your choice. We're just representing you when we stomp on you with our jackboots. So I don't believe in it at all, but again, it's one of those things that everyone who pretends to believe in it, none of them do. Not one person actually believes in democracy. Well, if you have a room full of people and the majority votes to oppress you, are you going to be, oh, good, the majority got their way? Get robbed, get murdered. It doesn't matter at all. As long as the majority got their way, that's, if you actually believed in democracy, that would be your response. That's the response of zero people ever. Nobody believes in democracy. Zero Democrats and Republicans believe in the Constitution. The vast majority of people who call themselves Christian don't believe what Jesus said. They don't at all abide by it. So it's so weird that people will just defer to whatever feels like, well, I'm backed up by this thing that I don't really believe in, and I constantly contradict it. And right now you have Mango Mussolini and his stooges like, we need the rule of law. Again, another thing that, screw your rule of law, that's just made up BS of political parasites. But they pretend we believe in the rule of law, and no, they don't. Which part of the rule of law lets you murder people in a boat in international waters? None. There is, however, a part of the law, 18 U.S.C. 2441, that basically says that Pete Hegseth should be put to death. It's the federal statute against war crimes, and what he ordered openly, bragged about it, and what Navy SEAL Team 6 did was just murder. It's a war crime. It's absolutely. So are all those, we believe in law crowd on the right saying, well, time to string up Hegseth, because that's what federal law says to do with people who do exactly what he did. And it's not disputable. He did it in the open. He bragged about it. He'll just say, no, that's lawful. We're allowed to do that. That's not denying it. It's like someone going around committing murder and, hey, you murdered somebody. No, I didn't. I'm allowed to. Doesn't count as murder when I did it. Yeah, but you murdered somebody. Yeah, but I'm allowed to. That's their defense. They're not pretending they didn't order the murder of people from countries that the U.S. isn't at war with, nowhere near U.S. jurisdiction, just murder. So they'll pretend we're all about the law. And of course, they're not about any of the law. Certainly not about the 9th and 10th Amendments, which say the feds don't have any power the Constitution didn't give them. You know what the Constitution didn't give to the feds, for those of you who believe in such things? Any power to forcibly control who can be in the country. Every bit of border controls, every bit of ICE is 100% unconstitutional. It's a violation of the 9th and 10th Amendment. Nothing in there comes close to giving the feds power to do that. Again, I don't believe in the Constitution at all. But the people pushing this authoritarian crap pretend to. But no, they don't. There's also that little thing of due process. You don't get to cage people or blow people up without due process. But no, that's not what they mean when they're deferring to the law. See, the reason they do this crap, deferring to this thing called the law, which is bullshit. It's bullshit anyway, even if they actually were abiding by it. But the reason they do that is so they can pretend to not be responsible for what they do. Pete Hegseth and the dumbass cowards who followed his orders to commit murder, they are murderers. But they will know we were using the force of law to no, you murdered people. You ordered other people to commit murder and they committed murder. That's murder. You want to call it something else. You want to hide behind a law that you don't even believe in and you don't even apply in order to get out of the responsibility for what you did. That's why they do that. Same reason Republicans and Democrats pretend to believe in the Constitution. I have a constitutional right to blah, blah, blah. Yeah, but you don't give a crap about anybody else's constitutional right. The political left, we have to have due process before getting picked up by ICE or before being forced to stay at home or being coerced into getting injected by something. How about the due process there? Well, it didn't matter. That was a crisis. So, what part of the Constitution says in case of crisis you can throw all this out the window? None. There's no such provision. So you don't care about the Constitution. But all of this is just people trying to not take responsibility for what they advocate and what they do. People in the government, people who vote for the government, everybody in the whole ridiculous clown circus is trying not to be responsible for what they do, what they advocate, what they vote for. And the fact that if you do away with just that, you end the entire system, it's kind of amazing. Like, again, there's so many simple statements that all by themselves rule out government. One of my favorites is, if you shouldn't do something, if it's wrong for you to do a certain thing, it's also wrong for you to try to get somebody else to do the same thing for you. And if you phrase it like that, almost everybody would think about it for a second and go, well, yeah, of course. If you shouldn't murder your neighbor, then you shouldn't hire a hitman to murder your neighbor either. Okay, yeah, pretty simple, pretty obvious. Like any 6-year-old should be able to understand. Don't hit Susie. No, don't tell him to hit Susie either. It's like, oh, okay. Zero statists can comprehend that because every single statist, every single voter is voting to have government do things that they know would be wrong if they didn't themselves. So this constant attempt to dodge personal responsibility for what you believe, for what you advocate, for what you do, statism absolutely requires that. Because if every voter took personal responsibility for what thugs of the state were doing, it's like, yep, I would do that. I would force my neighbor to hand over money to pay for my kids' schooling and call it property taxes. And I would send men with guns to eventually kick him out of his house if he doesn't hand over the money to pay for the school that he doesn't want. He doesn't even have kids there, but it's the school my kids go to. And if he doesn't do that, I would send armed people to kick him out of his house eventually after like the foreclosure and eviction notice and all that fun stuff. If people were just consistent and not trying to defer their responsibility to somebody else, just that by itself ends statism. It is impossible to be a statist and actually accept responsibility for your actions. The entire premise of authority and statism is that, well, if you do it by way of these weird rituals, you're not responsible anymore. You didn't really do it. You just voted for representatives to enact a policy that yada yada. But no, you're responsible. You tried to make it happen. It happened. You're just as responsible as if you just hired some thug, hired some hitman. The fact that the process was slightly more convoluted and complicated doesn't change the fact that you tried to get somebody else to commit immoral violence, and they did. That makes you partially responsible for the outcome. And every Democrat and every Republican is partially responsible for constant immoral violence against millions of people they don't even know. And none of them will accept that responsibility because they'll all defer to, well, this is the system we have, or this is democracy, or this is something other than I advocated evil. Zero statists, none take responsibility for what they actually try to make happen because they're all trying to defer that responsibility to this mythical thing called authority. And if humanity would just stop doing that and just take responsibility for what you're going to do and what you're going to advocate, that alone would create a free society with no ruling class. Just that. But easier said than done. Yeehaw.